My name is Asha Ivy, and I am the creator of Chary. Chary is an online budgeting application that helps you keep track of your budgets, expenses, and earnings. It does calculation and data visualization for you so that you can quickly see the facts and decide where to make changes to your spending habits in order to reach your financial goals. The word chary means to be cautious or suspicious about doing something. In this case, we hope to help our users be chary when spending money. The goal of Chary was to create a tool that is less complicated and more aesthetically pleasing than something like a spreadsheet for budgeting. I created Chary as a way to practice my web development skills, but also because organizational tools are something that I use and benefit from in my everyday life. I wanted to build something that I could see myself using. If you want to test the website for yourself and don't want to put in your own email, feel free to use the email test@gmail.com with the password testchary. Now let's get into the website tour. Because Chary uses cookies to keep track of authenticated sessions, users must accept cookies in order to use the website. From the landing page, you can navigate to the login and sign up pages. There are two options available for signing in. One is sign in with Google. The other option is signing in with an email and password, where the password is used to authenticate the user. Passwords are encrypted using salt and hashing before they are saved in the database, so anyone with access to the database, in this case it's just me, won't be able to see what the actual password used was. This is what it looks like when you sign in with Google. But for now, we're going to log in using the email and password I mentioned previously. After signing in, the user is prompted to give their preferences. These choices do not affect much, but give a bit of personalization to each account. The currency symbol entered here is the symbol that will be used to format money amounts. Now, before we move on, I would like to quickly show how cookies are used to indicate that a user is logged in already. If we open a new tab and go to chary.com, notice first that the cookie consent form is not shown. Second, the user is already logged in. Rather than seeing options to log in from the landing page, the user now has a link to go directly to their dashboard. This cookie expires after a few hours or when the user logs out. Now onto the dashboard. This first tab is the overview section. We don't have any data right now, so we will look at this section in more depth later on. For now, let's get started creating some budgets. You can create a new budget by clicking on the green plus sign on the overview page or by navigating to the budget tab and pressing the green plus button there. This is the form to create a new budget. Let's create one called groceries and give it a $350 amount. I'll add a short description, which is optional. Next, we decide how long the budget period should be. In order to make budgeting more organized and uniform, and to allow users to easily compare spending in one category to another, budgets are designed to start on the first day of any given time period. So a monthly budget will start on the first of the month, a yearly budget will start on January 1st, etc. For our grocery budget, I'll choose monthly. Next, the user decides if their budget should recur or not. If a budget recurs, that means the user wants to keep track of the expenses in that category for more than one period. Groceries are something that you would want to keep track of every month, so I will set this budget to recur. An example of a budget you might not want to recur is maybe a holiday budget or a budget for a vacation, something that you plan to happen once in a while, but not every week or month. Finally, we decide the entire life cycle of this budget. Since I am just getting started, I will set the budget to start this month. The end date I can leave blank, since I don't anticipate not having a need for it anytime soon. And then we can submit. Alright, now that we have submitted the budget, it will show up on the budgets page, as well as the overview page. I'm going to create a few more budgets to define how I'd like to categorize my expenses moving forward, and then we can continue. Now that I have my budget categories defined, I can start adding my expenses. Let's say I went grocery shopping at Aldi this morning and spent $70 on groceries. Here, I can select the groceries category, and because I don't know when I'll go shopping next or how much it will be, I will say that it's not recurring. A good example of a recurring expense is rent or a streaming subscription. The date initialized in this case is the date that the grocery trip happened, which is today. Now you can see the expense listed in the expense section, as well as on the overview page. The progress bars for the budgets are also updated. Now I'll create some more expenses to show you how this page looks once it's filled up. Now we have a long list of expenses. By default, this page shows all finalized expenses for the year. Using the filters at the top, you can choose the time period you want to view, change the view dates, and you can choose whether to show or hide upcoming expenses. Now, earnings work very similarly to expenses. The main difference is that there is no budget or saving category. Logging your earnings can be a great way to anticipate upcoming paychecks and to see if your planned expenses can be covered by what you're earning. I'll just quickly create a few earnings to show what this page looks like. Now, there might be some situations where you will want to edit one of your budgets, expenses, or earnings. Maybe your rent is going up starting this month, or maybe you want to spend less on takeout this week. Making changes to specific occurrences is really simple. Let's take this paycheck for example. I know that I get paid every 2 weeks, and I know approximately how much my paycheck will be, but exact hours may differ from week to week, so the final pay may fluctuate. It is still helpful to have a default estimated amount, but once you receive your paycheck, you will probably want to edit this amount so that it's the most accurate. You can click this edit icon and modify just the amount. Since we intend to only edit this one instance, we will leave the recurring setting and the start and end dates alone. They act more like metadata now, though it is still useful in some situations for a user to edit these values. All we have to do is submit, and we'll be asked if we want to edit one recurrence, all occurrences, or all future occurrences. Now we have successfully changed the value of one occurrence of this paycheck. This new occurrence still has reference to the other occurrences, so be careful when changing certain values or settings. I will go into more detail on how editing and deleting works in a moment. Editing is not the only way to create variations of existing entities. Another option is to duplicate. The difference between editing one instance and duplicating is that duplicating creates an entirely new entity with no reference to the original that it was duplicated from. This is helpful if you have a lot of similar expenses that are not regular or connected. Let's say I had brunch today at my favorite cafe. By duplicating this brunch expense, I don't have to worry about filling the input fields over again. I can just change the amount and submit. The last action a user can take is deleting. Users have the same kind of freedom when it comes to deleting as with editing. When it comes to a recurring entity, users can choose to delete one, all, or future occurrences. It is important to note that deleting is permanent, and choosing to delete all will delete all occurrences with the same original entity. Now we are going to briefly switch gears to talk more in depth about the smart updating system and how it works with the database. When it comes to editing, the recurring setting and the start and end dates might be a bit confusing. Once a budget, expense, or earning has been created, these values act more like metadata, as I mentioned earlier, to describe the life cycle of that particular entity. We can imagine this life cycle with a timeline. Let's use a monthly budget as an example. When you first create a monthly budget, it may look like this. It has a specific start date, and it stretches towards infinity with an unspecified end date. When you edit a budget for only 1 month, the timeline divides into 3 different sections. The first section defines the budget's behavior before this month. The second defines the new changes the user wants to make to just 1 month. The third section defines how the budget behaves after these new changes, which is identical to the first section. However, all 3 sections, including the second section, would be considered recurring. Additionally, the first section now has an end date right before the start date of the second section, while the third section has a start date right after the end of the second section, etc. Changing this metadata, or changing the recurring settings and the start and end dates, might have unintended results. However, there are some cases where a user might want to change these values manually, which is why these values are not disabled. Now that we understand how editing and deleting works, and now that we have some data, let's look at the Overview tab again. The first panel organizes the data we submitted into helpful charts and graphs. This first pie chart shows expenses per budget category. This next chart shows total expenses per month. And the last one shows total earnings per month. This panel also has a filter section so that you can choose what time period and date you want to view. Next, we have the overview stats, which shows clearly the total expenses and earnings for the same time period defined in the filters above. It also has a breakdown of how much is finalized and how much is upcoming. The next panel is a summary of all the active budgets. The progress bars and percentages help to visualize how much of a budget has been used. This profile panel just shows the user's current settings and includes an edit button for making updates. After that, we have two different tables for the 5 most recent expenses and the 5 most recent earnings. Now, there is one last section that is useful now that we have some more data to look at. Each budget has its own page with more information about it and the expenses that come out of it. You can get to this page by clicking on a budget in the Overview tab, by going to the Budget tab and clicking See Details in the Options menu, or by simply clicking on the budget card. All of the basic information about a budget is listed on this page. You can see how often it recurs, the meta start and end dates for the life cycle of this entity, and the description. There's also a small section that lets the user know if they are within, over, or under budget, as well as by how much. Next to that, we have graphs specific to this budget category. The first is a donut graph to show how much of the budget has been spent, the upcoming expenses, and how much is left. The second graph is a line graph to show how the current viewing period compares to previous and/or future periods. Users can use this graph to analyze trends in their spending habits in a specific category. There are filters here as well, so the user can change what period they are viewing. Further down the page, we have tables to show finalized expenses in this budget period, as well as upcoming expenses. The last thing I would like to showcase is the responsiveness of this website to different sized windows. You can see it here as we change the size of the window, but you can also test it out on your mobile phone. The tabs on the dashboard, the nav bar, and the options panel have different styles to suit different devices. The layout and several other UI elements have been updated so that Chary still looks and works well on smaller, more vertical screens. And that is the end of our tour. Please feel free to use this site how you like. If you find something broken or have any questions, you can contact me using the contact form on the website or by filling out a bug report. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.